conclusion that global coal supplies could peak in as few as 15 to 20 years. And the peak will happen first in China, which is using about 3 times as much coal as the next important user, which is the United States. And China is basing most of its amazingly rapid economic growth on its coal consumption. So let's stack all of these together: regular conventional oil, non-conventional oil, natural gas, unconventional natural gas, and coal. And what do we get? We get a peak in energy from all fossil fuels around 2010, with a gradual decline up through about 2030, and then a quickly increasing rate of decline after 2030. Now, this has enormous implications for global economic growth. It also has important implications for the whole climate discussion, because if you look at the IPC studies, the International Panel on Climate Change, they've done about 40 estimates of future CO2 emissions based on different estimates of global fossil fuel resources. And even the most constrained estimate, the lowest estimate, is about 40% higher than what the resource base itself is likely to provide. So what this suggests is not that climate change isn't a problem. It's an enormous problem. It certainly hasn't been overstated by anyone. But it does suggest that scarcity is likely to be a driver of policy, a driver of societal change before fear of climate impacts. Well, what about uranium? Well, uranium is another non-renewable resource. And again, the Energy Watch Group in Germany has done an excellent study on global uranium supplies. Even the most optimistic estimate shows a peak in global uranium supply to market well before 2050. So yes, we could build hundreds of new nuclear reactors to take the pressure off coal and other fossil fuels. But if we were to do so, we would exhaust the world's uranium supply very, very quickly. This is the world's current energy supply. As you see, oil, number 1, coal, number 2, natural gas, then nuclear. Altogether, we're looking at something like 93% of the world's total energy supply that will begin to decline within the next 2, 3, 4 decades. It's not only energy resources. It's not only fossil fuels. Interesting article came out in New Scientist this last May. David Cohen, Earth's Natural Wealth, an audit, in which he examined a number of ores and minerals, such as platinum, indium, gallium, zinc, so on, and found that these all will be exhausted relatively soon if we continue extracting them at current rates. Of course, we won't continue extracting them at current rates. The rate of extraction will soon begin to decline in all of these cases. And some of these have important industrial uses, like indium and gallium are used in producing, guess what, solar panels. So until we, and we can, but until we find ways of producing solar photovoltaic panels that don't use these rare materials, we're going to be constrained in terms of how many of the things we can actually make. World water use on its way up, but global water supplies going downhill. Many important rivers in China no longer reach their mouths because all the water has been extracted and used before the water can get there. Marine fish catch. We all know that global fisheries are in decline. Arable land, well, the amount of arable land had been increasing for a very long time globally as we cut forests, as we implemented irrigation systems and so on. Now the amount of arable land in most regions of the planet is declining, partly as a result of the fact that we're building cities and shopping malls and parking lots over some of the very best agricultural land in the world. This is one of the scariest ones to me. Topsoil in tons per person. Just look at that. In 1900, 4,000 tons per capita. By 1995, fewer than 50 tons per capita. What happens if that trend continues? And here's world rock phosphate production, which is also very important for modern agriculture. World rock phosphate production is set to decline very rapidly over the years ahead. World grain production is already declining on a per capita basis, and wheat, maize are already at record prices this year. Grain in storage is at the lowest levels since the early 1970s. Biodiversity loss. Here's a surprising one. Technical breakthroughs per billions of world population. Well, at least we have human ingenuity that's still on the increase, right? Well, in some ways, I'm sure it is. But actually, if you look at the number of patents taken out per capita, that peaked back in the 19th century. When you think about it, the kinds of discoveries that were being made back in the 19th century were really amazing, and it took so little to produce them. For a few dollars worth of copper wire and so on, somebody could, in effect, go into their garage and discover the laws of electromagnetism, or create the very first telegraph or telephone and so on. Now we have teams of scientists using hundreds of millions of dollars in enormous laboratories just to make a tiny advance in a very narrow field. And of course, world total carbon dioxide emissions certainly aren't at their peak yet, nor is global mean surface temperature. We have probably seen the peak in global climate stability within our lifetime. And from this point on, extreme weather events will likely become the norm. We're performing a giant science experiment with the Earth's atmosphere, and we have no idea what the outcome will be. One thing we do know is that Arctic sea ice just this last September reached a historic minimum of about 1 million square miles. The previous record low was 1.5 million square miles 2 years ago. So if this rate of decline were to continue in upcoming years, we could see the North Pole ice-free during the summer by 2015. Well, it's been fun, hasn't it? This last few decades of cheap, easy energy, cheap, easy mobility, cheap, easy food, energy. I have to say, my generation, I don't know if my generation are known as baby boomers in New Zealand as we are in North America. But after World War II, there was an enormous demographic cohort produced in, I think, probably most of the Western countries. And during the lifetime of this one demographic cohort, about half the world's important non-renewable resources will have been used up. That's quite a legacy. Isn't that something to tell your children and grandchildren?